Now let's look at how we could work with files in Java. So Java helps us work with a number of files in our system. So let's say you have a feature in which you have to create files on your server. So whatever the user is inputting, let's say you want to store it as files, or you want to create a file, a PDF file or an Excel file, and submit that to the user for downloading. So all this file handling can be done using Java. Also, the inputs and outputs which we have been taking from the user and giving to the user, all of that is also handled with Java, as you have seen till now. So now we are going to see how this input and output processing can be done using the files and their streams. So we had an input stream and an output stream from the user from the console, right? But other than console, we can also work with files which also work like streams. Streams meaning like streams of water? Yes, exactly that. It works like a stream of water. So Java would take line by line the stream of information from the file and then also output line by line into some particular file. That's how it works. We will also see how we could check the permissions and change the permissions in files. We would also see, how we could open files, read files, write to files. We could close files and delete files. We will also see the usage of BufferedReader class. So we have seen till now the usage of the scanner class, but we will also see the usage of BufferedReader and what is the difference between these two. And lastly, we are going to see something known as what is serialization or deserialization. Now for this, I'm creating a new file with the name file management. And in this, we are going to actually try to create a new directory and a new file, etc. Now, before anything, let me just remind you that we have already seen some streams. System.out, this is the output stream. System.in, this is the input stream. And system.err, this is the stream which would store errors if there are any while running your program. So these streams are already provided by the system in Java. We do not have to create them, but we can actually use them, especially the way we have been using system.out.println or system.in within our scanner class. Now let's try to actually create a new file. And for that, I would create an object of the file class and I would write new file. And in this, I would just write some random name hello.txt. That's it. So this is going to be the file which I want to create. Now we have an error over here. It says to import the file. So we have imported it from java.io package. Now we could simply do a file dot create new file. Now here's the issue. I always forget to create the main method before anything. So let's just create the main method first, and let's put this code from here over here. And now here this is giving us a problem. It says either add a throws declaration because it expects that the exception type of IO exception might be thrown by this. Now that's how the use of IDE would help us. It already knows that IO exception is something which is going to be thrown. So either you add a throws declaration or surround this with try catch. So we would surround this with a try catch. This file one dot create new file is something which is going to be surrounded by the try catch. And in this catch, it's just printing the stack trace. So this is how we can actually create a new file. Let me just try to run this now. So now it has run and it is terminated. So let me just try to now refresh this entire project. Now you can see that there is indeed a file hello.txt created over here. And the reason why this is created over here is because we have not specified any absolute path. This is actually a relative path of the file. Wherever your src folder is going to be, that is where it is going to create a new file. Now if you have to create a new folder and then a file within it, let's say for example, I want to write test and then slash. So I would put 2 backward slashes just so that it is escaped properly, otherwise it would give an error. So we have these 2 backward slashes. Now don't worry that your program might run on Windows, on Mac or on Linux, and it's going to work exactly the same. Let's just save this and run this. And now it says that the system cannot find the path specified. And the reason for that is that we have not created a folder called test. So first we need to create a folder called test, and then we can create a new file called hello.txt within it. So for doing that, first let me create a directory. So I would just call it dir equal to new file, the same way we would do it just like earlier. I would call the directory to be test, and now I would do a dir.mkdir. This is actually going to create the directory for us. Now once this directory is created, then we should be able to actually work around this. So let me try to run this now. Now there was an error over here. Just because we have used mkdir, instead of this we have to use mkdirs, because that's actually going to make multiple directories. If we, for example, had nesting, within the test, we wanted to create another directory, etc. So then we really need to use mkdirs. When I try to run this, now it does not give me any error. And when we try to refresh this, you see that there is a directory created with the name test, and now within this we do have a hello.txt over here. Now once we do have this file created, we want to check what default permissions does this file have within Java. Can we write into it? Can we read from it? Can we do anything like executing the file from Java? So to do that, let's actually try to check whether the file exists or not first. So when we actually create a new file, then let's actually just have a boolean which is maybe called exists, and for this I want to check if this file one exists or not. So we do have this exists method. If it does exist, then what do we want to do? Then I actually just want to do a sysout whether this file is readable or not, is writable or not, and for that I would do file1 dot can execute. This is actually going to share whether this file can be executed or not. So I would just write can be executed, and similarly I would actually try to do the same thing for whether the file can be read, whether the file can be written or not. So this would be can read, and this would be can write. These are built-in methods which we can use just to check the file permissions. So when we run this, you can see that we do have permissions for doing all these things. Now let's say we do not want to give these permissions to the user in the program, whoever is coding any other part of the program. Let's say I do not want to give them the permission to, let's say, write in the file. So for that I would actually remove all these. So let me just comment it. And now once the file does exist, what I would do is I would do a file dot set executable true. That's fine, because by default executable is true, but what I want to do is, let's say, set writable, and here I want to make it false. So now we cannot write over the file. Now if I try to actually run this part of the code, just to check if the file can be written or not, then if I run this, now it says that no, it cannot be written. So the file cannot be overwritten, whatever is there in it. Now the file is blank, we know it, but we do not want anybody else to write it. So we could use something of this sort, but for now I would just comment this out, and we should be working with the file and wanting to write something within the file. Now to do that, once the file exists, I would, let's say, call a method known as write to file. Now this is something which I am giving the name and passing in the file object. Now I'll create this method, and now within this I would want to write to this file object. So I'll just rename this to file just for simplicity, and now I want to really work on this. Now to write to a file, I need to create a BufferedWriter, This is a class of Java which helps us to write on files. So let me just create the name to be BW. So I would do a new BufferedWriter. And in this, I'm actually going to pass a new file writer. This is just a syntax which you have to, in fact, follow. Once you actually create this BufferedWriter, do the relevant imports. And now it says that, you really have to surround it with try-catch. So we would surround it with a try-catch. Now, once we have this, BufferedWriter object, now we can actually write onto our file. So we would just call the write method, and in this I'm going to pass some string. So I would just write this is a test file writing, and let's say if we want to add a new line character now, so I would just write bw dot new line, and then probably write writing complete. And yeah, just to make sure that everything is complete and I get a relevant message on the console, I would just write writing to file is done successfully. And let's say it is not done successfully, then I would probably want to do a simple sysout writing to file is unsuccessful. So just do a formatting, and let's try to actually run this and see if it works. So yes, it says writing to file is unsuccessful. We do not know what error occurred. So let's actually have e.print stack trace as well. And let's try to run this. Now it says it is unsuccessful. And now it says that, the access is denied. And it's not able to find this relevant file over here. Now, one of the reasons why this could fail is because we are trying to actually write to a file within the test folder. Let's actually, for the sake of demonstration, get rid of the test folder and just let's work on the hello.txt file which we have over here. So I'm actually deleting this entire thing. So we do have just the hello.txt over here, and now I'm trying to write within the hello.txt. So let me clear the console and let me try to run this now. So now the writing is indeed successful. Let's see what we do have in hello.txt. So now we do not have anything over here. Let me just try to refresh this. So now we do not have anything within the hello.txt. So we actually have to check, why this thing is not working properly. Now, one reason for this is because we actually used the BufferedWriter object and we never closed it. And that's exactly what I told you when we were working with the finally, right? That every time we either, whenever we are done successfully writing to the file or not, we should have the BufferedWriter object to be closed. Now, instead of putting it within the finally, let me just put it over here. This is something which we really need to make sure that we actually close the BufferedWriter. So now when I try to run this, it says that, the writing to the file is done successfully. And when I open this, now we do have everything written within our file. So here we need to make sure that the BufferedWriter is closed. Now, instead of actually, worrying about closing the BufferedWriter, there is another way of actually creating the BufferedWriter object in such a way that we do not have to worry about closing it always. And that is by actually creating this BufferedWriter object within the try parentheses. So we do have a round parentheses around try, and now we can actually put this entire line from here. Let's just cut it and put this over here without the semicolon. And now this is not giving us any error. That means that this is a correct syntax to use. And when we actually try to run this, it still says successful, and we do have, our contents within the hello.txt as well. So we do not have to actually close this BW object just because we actually use this type of a syntax in which we are putting things within the try brackets itself. Now, another thing which we really need to understand is that every time we run this code, the contents of the file would be rewritten. So earlier we said that, this is a test file writing, and then we wrote writing complete, and then I can just add some gibberish over here, and if I try to now run this, it says successful, and within our hello.txt this gibberish has overwritten over the text which we had. Now every time we do not want to really overwrite things, right? Sometimes we may want to even append to whatever we have written to the file. For this, if we go to the documentation of the file writer class of Java, we can just check that there is this file writer method with a boolean append flag over here. Now if we actually set this to true, then it would not overwrite on the file, it would actually append to the file. So we go back over here, we have this file over here, we actually add the true flag for appending, and now let's just actually remove the gibberish and try to run this. And now let's open this. You can see that it has actually appended instead of overwritten. So we do have the earlier gibberish, but now everything else is appended after this. Another thing which you need to know is that here we are always creating the file, but without even creating the file, this BufferedWriter will check if the file exists or not, and if it does not exist, then it is going to create a new file and write these things within the new file. So you do not have to actually worry whether you have this file created or not every time. So instead of actually creating the file, checking whether it exists, and if it exists or not, I'll just comment out this entire thing and actually take this try catch block from here and put this within the earlier, or with exactly where we define this particular method. So let me just remove this entire method from here and save this. So now let's just rename this to file1. And now I'm trying to run this. Okay, so now it says unreachable catch block from IO exception. This exception is never thrown from the try statement body. So now it's able to intelligently understand that IO exception can never be thrown. So there's no point of actually having this part of the code. And let's actually remove this try as well. So yes, we have our parentheses correct, and let's try to run this now. So now it says writing done successfully, and we do have this hello.txt. Let's try to actually delete this hello.txt. And now when I try to run this, it still says the file is done successfully, even though we do not have this hello.txt, and we actually did not even create it using the create new file method. But it's this BufferedWriter actually just checked whether it's there or not. If it is not there, it created it, and then it would write on it. So let me just refresh it now. We do have this hello.txt, and it has its content well written as well. Now let's try to read the contents of this file. And just like we have this BufferedWriter, we also have a BufferedReader with Java. So once we have, actually written successfully to this particular file, let me actually come down and now create a new try block, or let's say, let's just start working with the BufferedReader. So I do have a BufferedReader object now. I would create it using the new BufferedReader. And just like before, we would actually pass a new FileReader object. Now this is a syntax which you really need to understand and remember. We would have passed, the file name. So I can just, simply pass the file1 as well. And now we have to do the necessary imports as usual. Now what I want to do is, I want to actually create a new string, and let's say I would just call it contents. And within this contents, I want to add the contents of the file. So what I'll do is I'll actually, read line by line this particular file. Now it says that, we have to surround it with the try catch. So I would surround it with the try catch. And now instead of, working with this over here, I would just paste it over here. And now what I want to do is, as I just said, that Java is going to consider the file as an input stream, right? It's like a stream. So it's actually going to read line by line. We have this BR object, and we do have this particular method of read line from this particular file. So we are actually going to read the line, and then we are actually going to, let's say, print the line. Now, it's not just one line which I want to read and print, right? I want to actually keep reading and keep printing until the file ends. So for that, we really need a while loop, and until we can keep reading the line until this is not equal to null, then I would actually, want to keep doing something. So what I will do is I will actually assign this to my contents. So this would be contents equal to br.readLine, and until this is not equal to null, then what I would want to do is, let's say I want to do the sysout of the contents. And once this is done, remember we need to close this, right? So we would just close this. Now here again, it gives us that this part of the code is can create a new exception. So what we'll do is we can create a new catch clause which is actually going to throw an IO exception. So earlier there was an exception, file not found, which could be possible using this particular statement. Now we can have an IO exception as well. So let's just do away with this particular comment. And now let's try to run this. So now, as you can see, the writing was done successfully, and we do have, this entire contents of the file, printed again over here. And if we open this, we do have this particular same content. So we are able to successfully read from the file properly as well. Now, there's another way in which we can actually do the same thing. We already saw the use of the scanner class, and I want to show that over here as well. So let's create a new object of the scanner class. Now, scanner class we have always been using to take the user input, right? Now we are actually trying to use the scanner class to get the input or get the file read by our program. So here again, I'm going to pass this file1 object within the scanner class, and I'm going to do the same thing, create the contents and then try to print that. So let's first import the scanner class over here. And here it says, surround it with the try catch. So I would do that same thing. And I would actually do this, this entire same thing over here. Again, I would create, the contents, and then I would try to use the while loop. And in this scanner object, I would always check if this has something after it. And this is the syntax which you are supposed to use with the scanner object. So now in my contents, I would write sc.nextLine, and this is going to give me the next line of the particular file. And then what I would do is just a simple sysout of this content. And lastly, we do have this sc object to close, so we'll just close this. Now once this thing is done, let's try to run this. So I'll just comment out this BufferedReader part, and let me try to run this now. So now, as you can see, we do have something read from the file, and we have that exact same thing written onto the file as well. So now this scanner class does the exact same work as the BufferedReader class. So this is just another method of doing the same thing. So let me just uncomment out this part, and let me just actually write a new line after this writing complete, just to make sure that we do not have, any of this unformatting issue. So now this is quite a lot we have learned about the file, reading and writing. Now, when we actually try to read, we have these two options, right? BufferedReader and Scanner. The difference between these two is not a lot. BufferedReader is something which is synchronous, which, actually we can work for writing onto files if we do have a multi-threaded environment. And what is a multi-threaded environment, and how that is going to affect our writing or reading from a file, that is something which we are going to see in this particular week ahead. But for now, understand that BufferedReader is capable of writing and reading from files in a multi-threaded environment, and Scanner is not. So BufferedReader is definitely preferred in that sense. Also, BufferedReader has a large buffer. So if you have a big file to read, it does have, around 8 kilobytes of buffer, and which is huge. But, Scanner has a small buffer like 1 kilobyte. So obviously in that case as well, we do have BufferedReader working much better for our use. And also BufferedReader is a bit faster because it simply reads the sequence of characters, and Scanner is a little slower because it actually wants to even parse the input data. So generally for working with files, we do have, we always use BufferedReaders. But let's say for example, if we want to take input from the user from the console, we can also use the Scanner, because there we do not really need a lot of buffer and all that. Now once you are done, let's say by working with a file, and you want to delete the file, for that you can simply take the file object and call the delete method. So what you can do is just take file1 dot, and then you can call the delete method, and you really want to check whether this file is deleted or not. So this delete method is actually going to return a boolean to us, and which is going to tell us that the file is deleted or not. So if file1 dot delete is successful, then we would just write that the file is deleted successfully. And we could also optionally add an else part of it, and this would just simply say error while deleting. So let me run this. Now it says file is deleted successfully. When I refresh this, as you can see, we do not have the hello.txt. So once we actually got done with working with the file, we actually deleted it as well. I really want to remind you again of this particular block. Now this block is really important. Why? Because as I said, that we do not want to have this cumbersome task of closing the resources, and if we do not close the resource, then we would have errors in the program, just like we saw earlier. Also, this would cause a resource leak. So we actually opened the resource, we worked on it, but we did not close it. So that would cause a resource leak. We do not want that in our program. So make sure that you actually use this particular block, which is called try with resources. So this is pretty much about working with files. The last thing which is left is serialization in Java.